and welcome to the next episode of the Absolute Game of Nerds with your non geek, non nerd hosts, JP and Rohan. And with us today, with a guest who needs no introduction, but Rohan's going to make his best attempt to give him a perfect and proper introduction. Take it
Uh,
there, sir.
yeah. We got another great guest. We've got Drew from Como Comic Books. Another one. If you want to get some educated comic book on YouTube, he's definitely a go-to follow. He also does a lot of stuff with Marvel, which is obviously JP and I's main thing. But what I found really interesting about Drew's is I learned a lot of stuff about random random comics that I've never even heard of, like Gobbledygook and Evil Ernie and things like that. Um, so, Drew, say hi.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks
Yeah.
for having me, guys. I'm excited to be here. It's
Yeah. Someone want to be part of the podcast, and I don't know if the chair's moving because of the ghost or another kid's in the room there.
hard to say. Could just be science, a little centrifugal force there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah, no.
I don't know. Kid melt down there, right there in the middle.
Parenting first, podcast second.
Anyway, sorry about that, Drew. But so we always normally kick off the show kind of talking about your origin story. So why don't you start with yours? I assume, like us and many of us, that you started as a child, but take us away.
Yeah, do you want the personal origin story, the business origin story?
We'll get to the business later. Let's start with the personal.
All right. With me, basically started off with spinner racks at my local grocery store. We had, it was called Howard's Groceries, I believe is what it was called. And it had 3 spinner racks in it. And, it was the late 80s. So everything had a baseball card or a collectible card, and everywhere had spinner racks. So that's where I got my start. I think the first thing I ever bought was one of the Ghostbusters 2 movie adaptations that Now Comics was putting out. They had that real Ghostbusters license, and went from there into like Sonic the Hedgehog and Archie when that stuff came out. And it wasn't too long until I started buying Spider-Man, because I've always kind of been drawn to Spider-Man. And I used to do a lot of like antique mall shopping with my mom and my aunt back in the day. So like my uncle and my dad would go out to our farm and do, like farm stuff. And I was too young to do that yet. So me and my sister got to go with my aunt and my mom antique shopping. And I'd always find that booth that had comic books. So at the time, it was a lot of 80s stuff. But even as a little kid, I started buying Silver Age Spider-Man books. So basically, I started buying Silver Age Spider-Man sometime in the early 90s, and working to just fill in from there. But yeah, like you mentioned, I'm primarily a Marvel guy. I've been accused of being a Marvel zombie on more than one occasion, but I've found other things to like. I've always been a big fan of the Tales from the Crypt TV show, and then that led me into EC Comics. And of course, growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, you couldn't help but be into the Ninja Turtles. So I've kind of circled back around and hit that first Mirage series. And I don't think I ever had any of the Archie TMNT Adventure stuff, which is crazy because that would have been right in line with a lot of the other stuff I was buying at the time. But I picked up a few of those. But I don't know, that's kind of it. I got out of comics sometime in the late 90s. You hit that middle school age where you're more interested in parties and guitars and girls and stuff like that. So that kind of lured me out of the hobby for a bit. But once I got into college, I started going to school full time, and I was working full time too, and just trying to find anything I could do for me as like entertainment in between those two things, whether it was 20 minutes in between classes or the 30 or 45 minutes between work and school. I realized that you can buy a lot of comic books on eBay in just 20 or 30 minutes. So that's what kind of got me back into it, and then that just led me into some of my local LCSs. And from there, it just rolled into me being a customer, to being the guy that hangs out in the shop on his days off, to just doing stuff because I'm there and I'm bored, to being on the payroll, to being the guy who handles most of the buying of like collections and stuff for the store. And then I started my own thing, and it's just So it's all a snowball of
All snowball.
nerdom.
So, growing up, so very similar. So, Spider-Man, Ninja Turtles. Did you collect those things? Did you keep them, or like when you had your break, did you let them go? Or
Oh yeah, I've got everything from when I was like my own stuff from when I was a kid. I don't think I've sold anything. Now I've sold some of the stuff since I got back into it. Like I kind of hit a point where it's just I don't have room for all this crap, so I blew a bunch of stuff out when I first started doing shows. Unfortunately, that was about 6 seconds before everybody decided that the Snyder Detective run was actually going to be cool and worth something. So I blew that whole thing out for $1 a book at my first show, including 880. So that glorious Jock cover I loved from the moment I picked it up off the stands, I sold for $1, and I still haven't got one of those back in the collection. So that's a regret. But yeah, my kids' stuff, I've still got all that.
nice. So, since you brought up the having room to store, did I hear you correctly once say that? I don't know if maybe it still is or it was. Goals was to get every superhero comic of the Silver Age.
Marvel superhero.
Yeah, Marvel
Silver Age,
superhero. Yeah.
Yep. That's
Is
the
that
goal.
still a goal, or what was? Oh, so that is still a goal.
Yeah, I did some recalculating on that, and I'm down to 5 books.
5 books left.
Yeah, 4 of the 5 are really gonna suck, like an insurmountable amount of suck. But
They're big, expensive ones.
yeah, I'm down to the one that's not gonna be so bad is Cap 100, which I've resisted just buying one because I've had 10, 12 Iron Man ones. I don't know how many Doctor Strange 169s, Captain Marvel ones, all those April and May premiere issues. I've never had a single Cap 100. And it's just, I've not bought one because I'm like, sooner or later one's going to show up. I'm sure as soon as I actually do break down and pay retail for one, one will fall into my lap like usually happens. So that's going to be the easy one. Probably the next one is going to be a Daredevil 1, which that's a book I never prioritized because up until the last 4 or 5 years it was a crap book. Nobody gave a poop about it. Like I literally could have bought a raw 6.5 off a buddy of mine's wall for $900. Like it was marked $900. I probably could have beat him up a little bit on that, and that was 2014, 2015, something like that. It was just it's awful. It's not good to look at. It's not good to read. Sorry,
You don't like
Daredevil
the cover.
fans.
Is it
It's
Kirby cover?
well, I mean, it's a Kirby cover, but it's not Kirby inside, and it's not good. Wally Wood saved that book, and then in the few issues he was there, he basically got it to where it would limp along until this guy named Frank Miller came along and actually made people care about Daredevil for the first time. Yeah. But Daredevil 1's probably the next one. After that, probably Tales to Astonish 27.
Oh, is that Ant-Man?
Yeah. First Hank Pym. I've got 35 through, but I haven't got that Man in the Anthill.
That's going to be almost impossible. That's like one of the hardest ones to find from what I gathered, right?
It's really hard in high grade
rare.
just because of the coloring. And it's still a 10-cent Atlas book, essentially. So it came out the month after FF1. So it's really early. I think it's January 62. So it's not impossible. They're around. And
I see it pop up on Instagram every once in a while.
Yeah, I'm not a high grade collector. I'd rather have one of everything than the nicest of anything, is what I say. So generally, like a 3.0, I'm pretty happy. On some of these bigger books, like the next couple I'll mention, I'll probably have to loosen my standards a little bit. So the fourth one is Journey into Mystery 83. Again, that's another great regret. I had just changed jobs, so I went from my previous area of employment in like retail management, and I started in the mortgage industry. This has been almost 12 years ago at this point. and I go to St. Louis. It's me and my wife and my in-laws. I think we were going to a baseball game or something. And I stroll into one of my usual haunts, or it's actually the store doesn't exist as it did then anymore. And there's this raw JIM 83. It's like a 2.0, $875.
Oh,
Like, oh man, it's like I had the money, but I was still in that kind of like uncomfortable phase where it's like I just left this job, I just started this job, I should play it safe, right? So I didn't buy it, and of course, the next time I had an opportunity was for one about a third of the condition for 3 times the price. So
yeah.
obviously that wasn't going to work out. And then
Oh.
the last one is Hulk 1.
Oh,
Yeah.
So that's
Hard one to
that's
find.
that's the ugly one, which ironically, a guy I know in Kansas City has one. He actually it just went up on Grails today. He's got a 3.0 copy that came into his possession, and he's like,
22 grand, I think they said.
yeah,
right?
22 grand.
Oh,
or-
yeah, I did see that. Yeah.
yeah, he was offering it for 25 trade locally. I'm like, I could pile some stuff up, but that's honestly, the Hulk 1 is not my priority at the moment, or any of those aren't really my priority at the moment. I've got my sights set on something else as my main goal right now.
Yeah, I think I know what it is. We'll talk about that in a second. But so I want to go back to this Silver Age collection.
Yeah.
One, how many comics are we talking about here? And two, where do you store all those?
In a non-disclosed safe location.
The Batcave. Right?
Exactly.
No, DC
Exactly.
guy. So no, it'd be something else.
Well, I like Marvel and I like the Bat. You know, I feel like that's okay. If you just like the Batman, you're still not a DC guy.
Right.
Honestly, it doesn't take up as much space as you'd think, because really, you're only talking about 7 or 8 years out of about 8 or 9 titles, really, give or take. So it's not a huge chunk of real estate. Honestly, I think most of them fit in about 5 magazine boxes. Now I've obviously got some of the best of the best under the watchful gaze of the FDIC. But for the most part, yeah, it's like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 magazine boxes will fit most of that run.
Are any of those graded? And
I've got a few that are slabbed, like mostly the major keys and stuff. I've had slabbed, and that hasn't really been a big thing for me because I don't really intend on selling them. So most of the reason why I've had them graded is to just, in the off chance I kick the bucket, it's going to be a lot easier for the missus to
Yeah.
negotiate from a position of knowledge if they're already graded and this is what it is. But like I just sent some of my stuff probably 2 years ago to wound up sending it to CBCS just to have it encapsulated. But that was like, what did I send? One of my 181s that I hadn't had graded, like an FF5, ASM 3, ASM 14, a GS1, Giant Size X-Men 1 that I had raw. Just, I don't know, it was like a handful of books, but like my AF-15's graded, my ASM-1's graded, my FF-1's graded, X-Men 1, all the heavy hitters, Strange Tales 110, Avengers 1, TOS 39. Yeah, those are graded, but most of the run fillers aren't.
Yeah.
So how long have you been trying, like, when did you get some of those bigger books?
Honestly, it was thinking we bought our first house in 2010, and I'd started a year or two before that. So it was probably 2007, 2008 when I first started chasing down some of those bigger books, which the prices I paid for a lot of those will probably make you guys sick.
Oh, yeah, guaranteed.
I actually found the receipt for my first Strange Tales 110, because I've had a couple copies of some of these at this point. But my first Strange Tales 110 graded out at a 3.0. And it wasn't pressed or clean because I didn't know what the hell that was at that point. And shipped, it was like $157 or something like that, $155.
Nice.
But I bought it in 2010.
Yeah.
My first Tales of Suspense 39 graded out at a 1.8. I paid $400 for it. And that would have been probably 2007. It was pre-MCU Iron Man.
Yeah.
My ASM one, I paid $900 for. My FF1, I paid $700 for.
Oh wow.
It's just people don't realize how cheap these things were. Just 10, 15 years ago compared to where they are today.
Yeah.
My first 181 Hulk 181 I bought was a CGC 8.5. I paid $900 for it, and that was FMV at the time. That would have been
Yeah.
2007.
No, it's
Yeah.
about 10 times that.
Yeah, yeah.
Jeez.
So it's been a very, very good 10 to 15 years to already have some of this stuff.
Yeah. And now, so talk about your sights being set. If I recall, and I've actually talked to you about it a couple times on Instagram, that is it the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1?
Yep, that's where I'm.
First print.
Yep, I've actually I've set a few things aside here. I know we're going to talk about what I collect, but one of the last things I picked up is one of the few issues of the Mirage run that I didn't have. I'm doing every issue, every printing of the Mirage run 1 through 62, and I'm down to just a handful of those that I needed, and actually one less one just came in this week. So
What are the Mirage runs?
the Mirage run, that's the Eastman and Laird.
Okay, that's yours. Okay,
run.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's 1 through 62, but there were most of the first 7 issues. Well, I think all of the first 7 issues had multiple printings, and there's like a random, like issue 32 had a second printing. There's like number 3 had a convention variant. Number 4 had a error variant. So there's several different things to chase in that. But yeah, I'm down to where basically all I need to knock that out is the first printing of 1, the 4th and 5th printing of 1, which I was going to just not get because they're different covers. And naturally, I'd had them and sold them in the past when they were $10, $20 books. Now they're $100 to $200 a piece. So another genius business move on my part there. This is what just came in this week is the Air variant of TMNT number 4.
Mike
so-
from Lunch Mike told us about that, JD. So what's exactly the
Yeah.
error on it?
So this cover might look familiar because it's actually the published cover to Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And that screen glare is pretty wicked, but I don't know how to get around it. So it was intended for and is the cover to Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 1. But when they first went to run this second printing of TMNT 4, they mixed up the art and ran about 1,000 copies with this cover. It has the right trade dress and everything, so like it actually says Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, not Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But they churned out about 1,000 copies before they realized they'd flubbed up and stopped the run, and they still made it out. So I actually just got that from Bry's Comics. It's great having friends in this industry, but it's really bad when they get things you're like, man, I need one of those.
Yeah.
So no, I was happy to get that in from Bry just earlier this week. So
Nice.
yeah, now outside of those 3 printings of number 1, I just need the New York Comic Con version of number 3, and I'll have all of them.
Now,
What
the number
about-
3 had an error as well, right?
Well, I don't know how people really want to classify it. It's a variance, so they ran about 500 copies for an appearance at New York Comic Con. And
Is that the one you're talking about? Is it the
that's
Comic-Con
yeah,
one?
that's the one
Okay.
I'm talking about. Basically, what it is in the background, there's a sign that says like Laird's photo, which is just a part of the background, but it's white. It doesn't have blue on it. The actual regular runs, the coloring's just a little different, so that Laird's photo's colored in blue. So it's pretty easy to pick out, but there's not a lot of them. So
Yeah, that's the one that Lunch Mate told us about, JP.
That's the difficulty. Like you said, you did antique shopping, as a kid, and I just started where I live. There aren't very many. There's probably one comic book store near me, within maybe 10 miles. The next one is about 50 miles away. So I do most of my stuff when I travel for work, and I go to antique stores because there's not a whole lot of comic books in this county, and the counties I travel in. So I've been looking, and as I watch shows like yours, and Fry Show and Swaggle, I get ideas for what to look for. But when there's something like that, like an error variant, it always
Yeah.
throws me. Like what are you supposed to look for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they're pretty apparent. Sometimes it's difficult, and you don't want to. Not
Yeah.
like you're overpaying at an antique store, but you don't want to spend $20 for something that was only $1 and you missed,
Mm-hmm.
you got the wrong one. So
Yeah. And
there's
you
so much of that
definitely
stuff.
can overpay in an antique store, at least the antique stores around here.
Oh yeah,
But
I just
yeah,
was at one today. Yeah.
it's insane the amount of just generally useless knowledge you have to really keep up in this hobby because just like my buddy was telling me about a video he was watching. I don't remember the channel, but somebody was at an antique store and found a Ninja Turtles 3. And
It might have been Mike.
That's Mike's. Yeah, is it recently you
Bunch of
watched
Money
that?
Comics.
yeah,
That's
I think
Mike,
so.
yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were on the way to Indianapolis, so I was driving a van full of comics and interstate traffic hating the world as he was telling me this. So, I don't have the details. But yeah, basically he said his buddy told him, like, you need to go back and buy that now.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah,
it
that's
wasn't
Mike.
just a regular one. So, yeah. But, it's just that kind of thing. Like, none of us will ever know everything. It's just, there's too much.
Yeah.
Well, here's
What
usually
about
what happens to me. Real quick, is when I'm looking at antique stores, there's no cell phone service, so you
Because
can't
it's a
check
giant
key
metal
collector.
building.
Yeah, and I can't check key collector to see which one I'm supposed to be looking for. So,
Mm-hmm.
yep. Sorry, Rowan.
I was gonna say, Drew. What about the?
What was that? Lost you for a second.
I said the proof of TMNT #1. Are there like two
Oh,
copies of
that thing? Didn't Dinesh buy one of those?
He has
I
he
think?
has the one. I don't know who. Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. I don't know that I would have paid what he paid for it, but I'm not really in a position to have to make that decision. So,
Did you see what he posted this week that he has? It's coming to Kansas City.
what's that?
It's the original art to ASM 300, the cover.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
For that Spider-Man exhibit that's going
Yeah,
on starting next
he's
week?
he's like donating it for that fair.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
donating it.
exhibit is on my radar. I think it starts in about a week, so I'll be excited to go check that out. It's at, I think, the Union Station downtown KC. They have some cool stuff that comes through there, but this is the first time anything comic book related that I've been aware of. So I'm excited to get down there and check it out. But I didn't know what all they would to get in for it. But yeah, if the original pencils to that are going to be there, it's going to be pretty cool. Kind of makes me want to.
It's the inked version.
Okay, the inked cover. That's
Yeah.
sweet.
Yeah, which is still pretty sweet.
Well, and I'm sure I doubt there's pencil. I doubt they would have scanned it in. It's probably all one thing. It is, just
Yeah,
the
that's probably
cover.
the point.
It makes me want to schedule a trip to DC and log into the Library of Congress and check the original pages to AF-15. Just Google
Yeah.
those.
Yeah.
Those are there.
Yeah, they're in the Library of Congress. Somebody donated them. So it's the whole story. I don't know who did
Well,
it,
you
but
guys-
I mean, they gave up a fortune to do that. So I think
You
that's
saw
where they
that-
belong.
Yeah, I mean, and you saw
Just
that
one
recently
copy.
that that congressman swore himself in on the Superman one.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was in his last term.
That'd be one of those things. I bet you'd be surprised to see what all the Library of Congress actually has tucked away in there.
But I
That'd
mean,
be
like,
pretty
what
cool.
I don't even know. Like, would you even, as just a regular citizen, be allowed to even check out some of the stuff that they have there?
You can't check it out. I think you can schedule
I'm not check it out, but,
time
like,
with it. Yeah.
But like to look at it, yeah.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
that would be something.
I'm sure at some point, you hit a level of security where you have to have somebody sign off on it. Like maybe you need to contact your senator or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, if
Get
you
a-
get Nick Cage in there, he can get it out like
Yeah,
he did the
exactly.
Constitution. So you might have to call him.
I just need a hairdryer and some lemon juice, and we'll make this happen.
Okay, so you kind of briefly touched on going into selling. So you started hanging out at the comic book store, then you started
Yep.
working at the comic book store, and then essentially you took over the comic book store. So do you have a physical store?
No, I don't. And I didn't really take over. I was the guy who bought stuff. So like somebody would call and be like, "Hey, I got a comic collection I want to sell," and my buddy who was the manager and co-owner would call me up and be like, "Hey, somebody wants to sell a collection. When can you be here?" And I'd come down and I'd go through it and all that. But no, my show is pretty much just a traveling circus. We'll set up at however many shows throughout the year. Like I'll be in a small show in St. Louis on Sunday, which is just like a super cool old style comic show. It's not a convention by any means. It's
Like
an
a swap?
American, yeah, it's an American Legion Hall. It's been going on for 30 years at this point. But I mean, if it's full, it's shoulder to shoulder and butt to butt, and you can't move across the 40-foot room in 30 minutes, but it's pretty cool. So that's kind of my small show. And I just got back from Indianapolis, did Indiana Comic Con. What was that? Week before last, I guess it was. First weekend in May. That was pretty cool. But I sell a few things on my website, but I haven't been able to fully commit and start a brick and mortar or anything like that at this point. It's I still have my regular 9 to 5 job and just do all this stuff on the side.
Oh, you still have a
extra.
Oh, okay. I see. I thought you
Yep.
were full time. What do you do 9 to 5?
I'm in the mortgage
mortgage.
industry, so
Oh, okay.
I'm an
Same as my wife
underwriter.
Okay, my
Yeah,
wife is a loan officer.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Got it.
it's it keeps the lights on, and since I don't have to sell things, to keep food on the table or the roof over my head or anything, I can just kind of be a little more picky and choosy about how I go about it, which is fine by me.
Got it. So you don't really. So aside from the few that's on your website, you really just stick to kind of selling at shows, and that's kind of it.
You're
Yeah.
not eBay. You're not eBaying it.
No, I had a few things on eBay. The main thing is just like, especially when it comes to putting things on the website or eBay, it's like, I can go through all that, but one, that's time I could be spending making YouTube videos or getting other stuff around and ready for the next show. And, the fees just drive me crazy. Even the fees on my website, which are like, I don't know, I think it's like 4%, and then PayPal's
Yeah.
3%. That's
To run
still,
a transaction.
yeah, double the fees I'd pay if I sold the book in person. And like I said, I'm not reliant on selling a comic to pay my bills and stuff like that. So it's like, maximizing profits probably more important than churning things quicker.
Well, what about like
Most of the time.
like IG claim sales or anything like that? No interest in that
Yeah.
either.
Mickey has been trying to convince me to do a live sale on the channel for a while. Of course, he does those on his channel every once in a while. And I'm not opposed to it. It's just getting me to sit down and allocate the time to do it. But yeah, I'd be okay with something like that. It's just haven't committed to it, and I'm actually starting a show here in town, so I've kind of got that on my plate now to deal with. That'll be in August here in Columbia, but it's
Like you're
just,
starting a comic show in
yeah.
town?
Yeah, just kind of like the show I described. It's in a bigger room, so it's not going to be as congested, but just something very simple. I want to be able to pay for the room and advertising to do this. I don't want to make a ton of money off the show. I just kind of want to help facilitate a show to where people here in the local community have an opportunity to actually get access to a lot of stuff they wouldn't otherwise, because I don't know how the LCSs are around you guys, but when it comes to like Silver Age, Golden Age, high-end bronze stuff, key issues, the LCSs are just picked clean. You
Yeah.
don't find that stuff unless you're at a show. And I mean, we're fairly fortunate that we're about an hour and a half from St. Louis, hour and a half from Kansas City, so we're centrally located here in the state. But still, there's a lot of people that I think would be well served by just nothing fancy, just a simple little comic show to where they can come out and shop some people from both of those two metros, like buddies of mine that I've been able to convince to sign up and come out and set up, and hopefully it works out for everybody, because I'm trying to keep tables as stupid cheap as I can, just to basically limit the risk for everybody, because I want to get it established and up and running, and hopefully do something good
Is
for
that
the locals.
once a year, once a month, once a quarter? What are you looking to do with that?
Right now, just trying to get the first one going, but ideally, I think I'd like to try and do it twice a year, like, maybe once in the fall, once in the spring, something like that. It kind of depends on just how some of the bigger shows fall. Like Planet Comic Con in Kansas City is always our big show. It's starting to solidify as far as its dates, but in the 10 years I've been doing the show, it's been everywhere from Valentine's Day to like the second week in May and all points in between. So it's kind of hard to plan anything. And obviously, being a little podunk startup show, I'm not going to try to go against a 25-year behemoth right down the road. But ideally, I haven't got it exactly worked out. But like I said, the first show's in August, and I wouldn't mind doing something like maybe April and October or something like that. It's just the calendar gets pretty congested in Kansas City or St. Louis in general, just between toy shows, comic shows, you name it. Trying to
football teams there.
Yeah. You got the professional teams, baseball, soccer's starting to take off in St. Louis, I guess, football, and then the college stuff here in town. So there's a lot of kind of things to dodge and arrange around. But that's what I'd like to eventually do is, maybe twice a year.
Is it called ComoCon?
It's the Como Comic Show.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. That's cool.
Yeah, I tried. Como is just kind of a nickname the city adopted in the last 10 years or so. So I didn't want it to be the Como comic book show or something like that. It's trying to keep it a little more general.
So that's your Como Comics. That's named after the city.
Yep, Columbia, Missouri is what it's short for.
Okay, I was just assuming that was maybe your last name or something.
Oh no.
That's cool. Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I've got a boring last name of Stewart. Nothing too fancy.
But this weekend is there's a comic book swap in Pittsburgh that I went to. Did I go last? I think Halloween I went down for it, and it's just comics. It's not toys.
Yeah.
Because there's a Steel City Con that happens in Monroeville. It's outside of Pittsburgh, east of Pittsburgh, and it's full of toys, autographs, all kind of stuff. So it gets jammed. It was terribly jammed when I went. I think it was at Christmas time.
Yeah.
So the swap is a nice thing just to go and find comics, and you got a ton of different dealers. Because I started seeing the same guys, because the bigger shows that have the toys and the other collectibles have maybe 12 dealers, and they're all the same.
Yeah.
So I want to see something different, and they always have their prices jacked up. So the swap always seems to be the better priced option there. So, and then I live near Buffalo, so up in Buffalo, New York, they have there's a comic store that has there must be an empty space, a huge warehouse, not huge, but a decent sized warehouse that they have a show at. And I avoided it the first time because I thought it was just them doing their own books over there.
Yeah.
But no, they bring in other dealers. And I was there a couple weeks ago, and I just sold a bunch of books to some guy to get enough money to buy Batman 227. And the guy had it on the rack. And then when I went back with the money, he's just sold it to a guy. And I just missed it. So, but they have a decent amount of stuff there. So like the swaps are the way to go. So I think that'll go well for you.
They're great. Like I said, I've been going to this little show in St. Louis that I'm setting up at. Been going as a shopper just for years, and this will be my second time setting up there, and it's super low key. And the crazy thing about shows like that is you never know what'll walk in the door. I mean, I could walk in there with $1,000 in my pocket and walk out with $1,000 in my pocket and not find anything. Or I could walk in there with $1,000 in my pocket and be like, I should have brought 10x this, because I've heard stories of Spider-Man 1's walking in the room, Chamber of Chills 19's walking in, just crazy crap that you never expect to just randomly show up at a little 6-hour comic book show at a VFW or American Legion Hall.
Well,
So
that's the cool thing about those.
To Bronze and Modern Gods, Richard and John, those guys.
No,
Richard's in
I have to
California,
admit,
Cleveland.
I'm really bad at consuming content.
Just make you're better at
Unfortunately.
making it.
Well, I don't know if you check my track record the last few months with all the shows and stuff going on. I haven't been that great at making it either. So, but no,
Well,
what do they
you
got
bought a
going on?
collection, right? You bought a pretty
Yeah,
good collection. That's what you've been
yeah,
doing. I remember last. Yeah.
yeah. And honestly, that's what I'm hoping to take with me this weekend is to just try and get several long boxes of sets made out of that collection to try and start recouping some of that investment. But yeah, 17,000 books. It was a big one.
And see,
Real
that's the
quick,
thing you said. Go ahead, Roland.
I was just saying, real quick, I just wanted one question I had about the shows. So since you have this goal of collecting every Silver Age book, and then it's not your time, you're not really focused on the bill comic books. Do you have a tough time when you're working at a show versus like perusing and buying at the show?
Like I said, I was just at Indy a couple weeks ago. I spent exactly 0 cents, $0 at that show. It's just I'm trying to focus in on what I really want to buy. So the thing I have the most problem with is I'd like to be able to get out and do some hunting at the shows, like for content purposes. But when running a booth, especially like when I do our bigger show in Kansas City, like I said earlier, my wife helps out with us there, so I have a few extra sets of hands there. It was just me and my buddy Bob who helps me out at most of the shows this last weekend, and it's hard to just be like, hey, run the booth for a little while. I'm going to go record some footage or something like that. It's I feel bad abandoning him, so I can just go record stuff. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a challenge, but we usually try and let each other have some yard time here and there to run out and find stuff. And it's just kind of a trade-off, and it gets to be the point where you get cabin fever inside your little 10 by 10 square. You're just like, I got to get the hell out of here for a minute.
Yep.
So
Do you ever have any ambitions to go to like San Diego Comic-Con?
I wouldn't mind going there just to attend it. I don't think it would be worthwhile for me to try and set up there. I don't have the inventory to offset a $10,000 booth space and then plus all the
Holy
travel and overhead. But yeah, I think it's 10 grand a spot.
Oh wow,
last
I didn't realize it was that
heard.
much.
Yeah, it's just stupid expensive.
Wow.
Which is why the vendor room keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I was going to say. Is we talked earlier about eBay, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't like the fees with eBay, and that makes sense. I hear that a lot. But you've been doing shows enough that it seems like it's old hat to just set up, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
like for me to go think I'm going to do a show, not that I have the content to do that or the inventory, but
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to make all the displays, right? You got to have you have
Mm-hmm.
those made, right?
Yep.
And store everything in your like my dad was in a band years ago and he was able to fit all the instruments in his Grand Wagoneer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he
Yep.
knew exactly how everything fit in there. So you have a specific way to get everything in your car, van,
Yep.
SUV, whatever it is, and get it to the show. So it's old hat, but that would be like pretty overwhelming for someone first off.
Yeah.
Hence why we do eBay, but you have better luck at the shows.
And it's a lot easier to do eBay when you're starting out because you can run a pretty successful eBay store on 50 to 100 books. If they're the right caliber of books, or even if you do wind up with a collection, lots do really well on eBay. As far as moving volume. So just because I don't like to do it doesn't mean it doesn't work for a lot of people. I know Ryan with Automatic Comics, he bought a collection and was pretty surprised with some of the value or the money he was getting out of some of just random bronze and copper age lots of like Hulk and Avengers and stuff that he'd put up. So there's 100 different ways to skin this cat, and it's just for me, eBay just the juice isn't worth the squeeze at this point. That doesn't mean I might not come back to it at some point, but when they start switching over to their own payment system and all that, it just it sounded like more of a headache than I wanted to mess with at the time. So it was an easy point to just step back.
Yeah,
And
I'd love to do a show, but it seems like it's a lot of.
Starting out, it's kind of like trying to eat an elephant. You just got to
Yep.
take it a bite at a time. But I was fortunate in the first show I did. I was actually setting up for the comic shop I used to work at, and then it got to be where okay, we'd split the booth, so the comic shop would get half the booth, I'd get half the booth, and I figured out how to do a wall. So I was just able to incrementally develop all this over a number of years, and just kind of grown into what we do now. And there are some shows I've done where I'll do like a full end cap. So when you're sitting there with a 10 by 20 space, and I'll have 16 foot of wall, and I can do about 48 boxes on tabletops with an end cap like that. It's a lot. I think one of the best things I bought is I got a Uline catalog and bought one of these giant flatbed carts.
Oh,
Yeah. We can fit about 24 long boxes on a single load of this cart. So it's
that's the way to do it.
well worth it. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
versus just a regular dolly where we could fit about half that. It's pretty nice.
So you bought this collection, 17,000 comics. So I heard, I think it was on one of the live streams that you did with Mickey and with Ryan, where you said at this time collections are falling out of the sky in the Midwest. So tell me about like your process of sourcing your inventory.
It's multifaceted, but really the best way to do it is just like word of mouth. Me and a lot of my buddies who do this as well, just having your name out there and having been doing this for a while is one of the best ways. But there's the usual suspects. There's Craigslist ads. There's Facebook Marketplace. Just anywhere you can get word out that you buy collections. And honestly, some of the best leads come from just the unexpected places. The last collection I bought was a guy that I work with. Actually, I talked to another guy that we worked with, and he's into toys and vintage games and stuff. And we've talked about collectibles and stuff. He's like, hey, I was talking to this other guy that works with us, and he's got a comic collection he's thinking about selling. So next thing I know, it's a few days later, and I'm going out and buying this comic collection after work from another employee, which was pretty awesome. It wasn't anything mind-blowing, but there's like a Vengeance 1 in there, and some Ultimate Spider-Man 1 and 2 and 3, so some early Miles stuff, just early, or that kind of late aughts, early teens stuff. So it was a nice little collection, but that's just kind of reinforced the fact that the best way you can source collections is just tell anybody and everybody that you buy comics or you buy toys or whatever it is that you're after. That said, there's no substitute for being a brick and mortar store and literally just having a door for people to walk in. It's unbelievable the stuff that will just walk in the door off the street when you actually have a store like that. And I saw it for years, and it just blew my mind and continues to blow my mind.
Well, yeah, the store I go to, I've been there when things walk in the door, and like you said, clean when they get these like he'll get an X on the next day. Like it's pretty wild.
I mean, comics being what they are, 80% of it's junk, for lack of a better word. Just fillers, 90s stuff that doesn't have a lot of value. But if you're not taking the time to go through it and looking at it, you're doing yourself a disservice. I remember a lady brought in a was like 35 quart totes you can get at the store. Her mom had died. She was just cleaning out her house. I was going through, and it's just like a bunch of low-grade bronze junk, just filler stuff. I think by the time I got down to the bottom, I had 4 or 5 books left in the bottom, and I'd set out 3 books that would have been worth even talking about. It was like a Ghost Rider 1 that was beat to crap, a Spider 1, and I can't remember what the other one was off the top of my head right now. but I grabbed the last 4 or 5 books in the tote, and like the second to last one was an X-Men 1,
Huh.
the real one, not the Jim Lee one. So it's just like, if you're not taking the time to crawl through all this dirty, nasty stuff that walks in, you never know what you're gonna find.
Yeah, I mean, there's some like, what they find, like the episode we this past week was with this guy named Dave, who was his title is West Coast Avengers, and he's got this great video where he bought this short box for $600. And he's going through it, and he finds like a giant size X-Men 1, and he like freaks out. It's like one of my favorite videos because it's like the pure joy of finding it. Like in there's like a GSX 1, there was a Luke Cage 1, there was an X-Men 94. Like there was, I think he said at the end of the day, he said on our show, I think he said there was like $18,000 worth of goods in the $600 box.
Wow, that's insane.
Yeah.
I've heard a similar story. A buddy of mine who owned a LCS in St. Louis. He said this weird guy walked in. He had 2 like grocery bags full of comics, but he'd only let him look through one. He's like, no, I don't want you to look through this one. Just look through that one and make me an offer. So he looks through it, and he says a bunch of junk. So he gave him an offer that was in line with what was in the bag he let him look through. So the guy said, okay, takes the money and leaves, and he goes through the other bag, and giant size X-Men number 1. It's like, well, if I'd have been able to look through that bag, I would have made you a better offer. But you don't have any idea. And one thing you learn very quickly in this business, you meet a lot of interesting people, really interesting people. And I think that's just retail in general. But yeah, it's you run into some characters in the industry, that's for sure.
Yeah, I I definitely agree with that. The closest comic store to me, I don't get along with the guy too well because he just, he has his ways. I had a run in with a dealer at a comic show a couple months back. It's my charm, I guess, as Rohan would say, or my lack of charm, and that's why we had an altercation. But then you got really good people that you meet.
Oh yeah.
All the people we've interviewed. There's a lot of I would say trusting people, which is good. Then you can bite you in the ass too if you don't watch it. But
yeah,
I think there's been some some positives, but you do run into some real characters.
For sure, yeah. I mean, there's definitely sharks in the water. But yeah, for the most part, most people in this industry, in the hobby, are really great.
And I think it probably comes down to, like, you don't have to do it for your livelihood, but if you did, you might be more cutthroat, right? Not that we're not trying to get a deal. We all want a deal on something, but if you had to rely on it, it's food.
Yeah, I mean, and it is cutthroat, especially when you get into a competitive area. Like I'm fairly fortunate that I'm kind of out here in the middle of the state, more or less on my own. I mean, there are other people who buy collections, but they're mostly collectors, and I have some competition from some of the local comic shops. But as far as people like actively seeking out collections and all that, it's pretty much just me. But you get into some of the Metro in KC or St. Louis, and I've seen friendships get ruined. I've seen arguments, fights. It could be nuts. Because, like you said, it's business. It's food on your table. It's a roof over your head. Like I said, though, there are sharks out there, and I know of several people who have put that food on their table by sticking it to somebody's grandma. And it just, inevitably, if you do this long enough, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you make a deal based off of your best understanding of what you're looking at, and then when you get into it, you're like, oh crap, I didn't know this, I didn't know that, and you realize, like, wow, I wish I'd have known this because I would have made a better offer. But
like, what's an example of that you like? You change the names and save the innocent, but
yeah, I bought a collection. This was well pre-COVID, probably, and it's also kind of jarring to talk about because, like we discussed earlier, just the increase in prices over the last 10, 15 years, with that real big ramp really in the last 5 to 6. I bought a collection of low grade, just golden age randomness. So it was kind of later golden age, early atomic age type stuff. And it was no titles I really recognized. There's some oddball stuff. There were a couple like late 100s, early 200s detectives. No key covers, no key appearances, anything like that. Just kind of little this, little that. And we made a deal, and like, okay, I think I'll do all right with this. Nothing that I knew I could just flip like that, that would be real high demand or anything. So it's like, this is kind of what I feel like I would offer. If you're happy with that, it's like, I don't know how quick any of this is going to move, but I feel like I can get my money back and make some profit. If you're good with that, that's what I do. And the seller's like, yeah, I'd do that. I think they were her dad's, and they were just cleaning out the house or whatever, trying to get rid of stuff. And then I get home and I start looking at stuff. It's like, oh, okay, well, I didn't know that's what that was. And oh, crap, this is worth that. And it just kind of snowballed on me. And it turns out it's like, all right, well, I did a little better there than I intended to. And there are remedies to that. You can always call them back and be like, hey, I would like to give you more money. Most people are generally happy to receive that phone call.
Oh, yeah.
But I think intention is the main thing there. Like if you go into a deal trying to be honest with people, trying to ultimately it's business, you've got to be able to make money or else you're not going to be in business. But you also want to be fair. You don't want to take advantage of somebody. Knowing, like from a position of knowing, like, I know this book's worth $1,000, but I know you don't know what it is, so I'm going to offer you $50 for it.
Yeah, well, that's like Lunch Money. He had when he first started doing his show, like his YouTube channel, about 6 or 7 months ago. He went to a garage sale, and this guy was selling like 800 comics and was going to give it to him for, what was it, like $80 or something like that.
Oh wow!
And he went through it, and there was a bunch of Bronze Age stuff that didn't seem like much of anything, but he found, Secret Wars 8. And so when he got home with the stack he had, I think he had a stack of maybe 40 or 50, and he paid 20 or $30 for it, found the Secret Wars, went back to give the guy more money, and then the guy offered him the rest of the collection for nothing almost, just because he wanted to get rid of it. But his honesty catapulted that next option for him because of his honesty.
Yep.
Like you're saying, if you call someone back, they'll tell people that, Drew, he was, he told us the truth. And there's a fine line. Rohan and I were talking about this. If the internet is out there, you can check all these prices. So you find a book for $1,000 or you think it's worth $1,000. Do you tell them or not is what we struggle with, because just because it's worth $1,000, and you better check Key Collector, you better check GPA, and you better check eBay, because they're all going to be different.
Oh yeah.
And so that book on Key Collector might say, oh, this is $1,000, but you put on eBay and it doesn't even move, right? Or in a show it doesn't move because there's 10 of them there, and all the booths next to you.
Yep.
So
yeah, one of the things I've said for a long time that I'd like to see Key Collector do is to add a date. Like, okay, this is the value you're ascribing to this book. When did you set that? When was the last time this was revised? What was the valuation history of that book? So like, we marked this up in May of 2021, and we haven't looked at it since. So it's been sitting there for 2 years. Guarantee you the market, when you put that price there 2 years ago, is going to be a little different.
Well, that's what always messes me up at the antique stores. If I do get signal looking at Key Collector, I'm like, oh, look at this. And again, it helps you find the variant or the error and all those stuff we were talking about earlier. But I might just grab a book thinking it's something I can flip, and it's not, because eBay has its own price, and that's where I sell most of my stuff at right now.
Go
for
ahead.
the dealer, right? So that's my next question to you, is that, how do you deal with a situation, right? You got to be honest, but then you as a dealer, when someone comes to you, Are you giving 10 cents on a dollar, 50 cents on a dollar? Every dealer's got some type of margin they have to work with, or some type of cost they have, or I have overhead type thing. So
Yeah.
what's fair?
Um, Ultimately, when it boils down to it, is you've got to be able to double your money. Like whatever I spend on a collection, I need to be able to get at least double that out of it. Now, it all depends on what's in the collection. Like, is it a small collection that's made up of big books? Like, if it's a collection of a guy, like, I only bought major keys, I have 30 books, it's anything and everything every comic collector could want, as Alex would call them, like foundational books, right? Just the stuff that, you don't have to try to sell, it just sells itself. At that point, you can lean in and offer more. Like major keys, maybe it's 60%, maybe it's 70%, maybe it's 75%, because, that 25% on some of those books is a pretty good chunk of change. If it's a sizable collection, then at that point, I generally look at it and I need to be able to make my money back in X number of books across this collection. And then the profit will come after the main stuff, the hot stuff, the valuable stuff, has sold, and I'll make my money when you get down into the $50 books, the $20 books, the $10 books,
So like I go a guy that bought a big collection, and I see him at every show now selling all the long boxes, and he said it was a $30,000 auction, $32,000 he paid, and there was Giant Size X-Men, Hulk 181. He said those two books alone will give me 15, I think, from the grade. So he's half his money back, but now you got 15 grand out on those $20 and $50 books you're talking about, or dollar books.
Yeah.
So how long do you get that back?
And man, I don't know that I would have made that deal, honestly.
I think it was. I saw it. I went. I would have maybe it was like 12 long boxes. He paid double what I probably would have paid. But I think it got into an auction situation where everyone had to turn a bid in.
Yeah.
And
like a blind bid.
Yeah. So
yeah, and I think that there's so many ways that they can get you, but ultimately, yeah, in a situation like that, I how I would approach it was basically, okay, I know there's this book in there, so the Giant Size and the 181, I know those two can get me 15. So what else is there to support it? At that point, starting out, I'm going to start my offer at 15 because I know I can get it back there. If I go through the rest of that collection and there's nothing of substance that's going to help quickly earn back some of that investment, my offer's not going to go up a lot because honestly, if it's only 12 long boxes, that's not a lot of volume to help recoup some of that profit at that point. But I also have been doing this long enough that I know that a bad deal is a lot worse than no deal,
Yep.
So it's
Good point.
a lot of these things. Now, when you get into some hard to find golden age or pre-code, or if you're looking for X book in a specific grade that has a low census count, something that's like legitimate scarcity, you can go ham on. You can lean in on that if you need to. But the short story is Giant Size X-Men 1 and Hulk 181 are not rare books at all. Go to any major show in the country and you're going to see guys that just have them shingled.
All of them.
Yeah, just 3, 4, 5 copies. Value doesn't mean scarcity. Yes, they're nice to have. Yes, there's a lot of interest in them, but it's not worth getting excited and kind of going off the deep end, especially because he's, like you said, he's still got 15, 16K hole to dig out of. With $100 books will get you there, okay, but when you're starting to have to rely on $10 and $20 books, the collar starts to feel a little tight at that point, and the temperature of the room comes up.
My son bought me a bunch of Spec Spider-Man. He bought it at the local comic shop here, and I had a bunch already. I had like the 90 and the Spot Run and whatnot. So I said, I'll try to get the first 100, at least the first 101. And this guy that the collection we're talking about, he was not willing to budge on those just filler issues, like $5 a piece. I'm like, they're not even that great shape. I mean, come on now. This is like I'm just trying to fill a run here. I didn't even read them, and he was like, nah. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll see you then. Trying to get that 15K back is what he was doing. And I don't blame him, but still.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't envy his position at that at all, which, again, it's all about what's good for the seller and what's good for the buyer. Like when I bought that 17K collection, the seller had a number in mind. And, well, he had a number. He's like, this is what I want for him. So me and my buddy Bob, that I mentioned earlier, roll up, and the best we could, we started going through it. It was 115 short and magazine boxes, and then a couple of totes and some other stuff. So there's only so much you can do in an hour or two trying to go through that much stuff.
17,000 books.
Yeah, to verify that this stuff is there. So you just try and hit the high points. And I went through there, and to the seller's credit, he had everything cataloged, like this is what's in this box, this is what's in that box. So it was just going through and trying to make sure we were finding things like the Ninja Turtles 1 through 4 and Raphael we found pretty quick, the ASM 298 through 300, the Evil Ernie 1 through 5, just like the bigger books that we knew were in there, that would support that value. And we did that. And me being me, I mean, I think, side note here, one of the nicest compliments that's ever been paid to me is a guy, he's a dealer in Kansas City. He sold a buddy of mine a book, and my buddy was a little overstimulated at the time. He was at his first ever comic show, huge Batman fan, and he was trying to make a deal on a Batman 171, which is that pink Riddler cover.
Yeah.
So he was talking to the guy about it, and my buddy had gone over with him to try and work the deal, and he said, so you want this? He goes, what would you do on it? And he knocked off, I don't know, some teensy weensy little amount, whether it was 15, 20 bucks. And he goes, sold. And my buddy, who had gone with the guy who was buying the book, just does one of these, like, oh, God. It's like, that's not how you do this. And the guy just started laughing. He goes, I guess it's pretty obvious you haven't gone to the Drew Stewart School of Negotiation. So me and this guy, we had done some pretty intensive negotiating over a couple of books at a different show. And just, I love the dance. So I thought that was a pretty nice compliment.
Oh, yeah.
But me being me, when I was looking at that collection, it's like, okay, this is what you say you want. I'm always going to ask, if there's any wiggle room on that, because, every dollar that stays in my pocket is one less that I have to replace, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no reason not to.
Exactly. Which, to the seller's credit, he's like, nope, I this is what I want, and I'm firm. I'm like, well, okay. Because it was a lot. It's the most I'd ever came out for a collection, so I was a little nervous, especially considering, I broke one of my personal rules, and it was not business funds. It came out of household savings. So, the in debt to the bank of Mrs. Como. I was a little nervous there. But we got the deal done, and I was confident in what I'd spent. And I mean, we've had 2 shows so far this year, and between that collection, some of the other stuff we bought up, I mean, it's all paid for now, so we're in the profit. And the best part about that is, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I bought this, but you kind of upgrade things along the way, right? So my raw TMNT copies became CGC 9.4 copies, and that kind of stuff. So that was nice, but it's all about just finding the deal that works for everybody. And if, I'm not the buyer for your collection right now, that's fine. Good luck to you. I hope you find that person who, is able to pay your asking price or whatever. But I'm gonna go on and find the next one, I guess.
It's tough. I mean, I've yet to buy a collection, and I've done I've done a little bit on Facebook and went to see a collection and couldn't bring myself to pay the price because these people look on eBay and see what the asking price is. So they're already so elevated before you even get there.
The worst is comic book realm. When you get people who get on there and start looking at stuff, they're like, yeah, my collection's worth $13,000. It's like, well, that's because they say every run filler issue is worth $3 and you have 2,000 run filler issues.
Yeah. I mean, you got to get them back down to earth sometimes, and they're not willing to do it. And it just depends on how how well you can try to work that. Because if you piss them off, I'll just take it to the comic shop. Well, go ahead. They're not going to give you any better. They'll give you less than what I'm going to give you.
For sure.
But
and that's one of the things, one of the advantages I have. We have a store in the mall, and they might as well just say we pay by the pound, which I've heard of shops doing that before.
Yeah.
But I mean, it would be like they pay you garage sale prices basically for your collection. So I feel bad for anybody who actually takes stuff in there. We've got another local comic shop, and the one I used to work at, it's owned by a different one, and he does better. We've got one in the next town over. Well, there's a couple in the next town over, but one of them is notorious for being pretty stingy on what they offer, which it's the perfect combination of I'm not going to pay you crap for your books, but I'm going to overgrade them and overprice them on the flip side. So it's that double dip, it's the 2-for-1 combo that just really makes it nice.
That's the local one that I went to. I went to sell something, and he was giving me jack shit for it. But I said, you have that Eternals #1 up there for like 2021 price. He's like, I haven't switched that yet. And I'm like,
no.
You're going to give me eBay prices, but you're giving key collector price on this one.
Well, so I mean, that's actually how Como came to be. It was like, I think summer of 2012, and I had found a guy selling a comic collection up by my hometown. So me and a buddy of mine loaded up and went and looked at it, and it was 4 or 5 long boxes, mostly of late silver and early bronze stuff. Had some cool stuff in it, like had most of the 1966 Mary Marvel Marching Society fan club kit in it. So like the note paper or the notepad, the membership card, the button, just some cool Marvel Mania stuff like that. Bought the collection, brought it home. I picked out maybe a long box and a half. So I still had between 3 and 4 long boxes of this stuff left. And me and the missus were going to Kansas City a couple weeks later. I'm like, I'll just throw them in the car and take them to the shop, one of the shops down there, and trade them off. And because, like I said, I'd pulled everything out of it I needed and just had a bunch of stuff left over. And it was good. Like there was a nice Nick Fury run in there from the Silver Age, Bronze Age main titles, just good stuff. And I couldn't get $300 trade credit out of 3.5 long boxes of silver and bronze.
Wow.
I walked into a shop in Kansas City, and this is one of those, like, I don't understand. The store has like a cult following in the city, but their pricing is just insane. So the guy had a copy of Hulk 3 up on his wall, and it was like a 1.8 or a 2.0. He had it marked $300, which if he had it marked at $300, that tells you it was probably worth about $2.25 or $2.50 at most at the time. I couldn't get him to trade me straight up for 3.5 long boxes for that beat to crap Hulk 3. So I went to the next place down the road, and the guy's like, yeah, I'd give you like $150. So basically $50 a long box for bronze and silver. And I just got mad and I said, screw you guys, I'll do it myself.
Yep.
And
that's what I have. Guy I took in a Spider-Man 300. I ended up having 2 of them at one point after I got back into collecting, and I walked into the store, the only one that's close to me, that's decent. And I said, "Well, you guys buy comics?" And he's like, barely looks up from his computer, and he's like,
Mm-hmm.
"What do you got?" I show him. He's like, $100, and I was like,
$100.
he goes, I can sign it for you, or I'll just give you 100 for it. And I'm like, $100. I said,
Mm-hmm.
there's no damn way. I said, at least book's at least 500. He goes, that's my offer. I'm like, oh my God, forget this
Yeah.
shit. That's so annoying.
Yeah, I know a
So,
lot of shops, and it's funny when you do this, you get friends that do the same thing, and inevitably sellers will start at the brick and mortars and stuff, and a lot of times they aren't happy with the offers they get there, so then they come down to guys like me and my buddy who buy and sell, but we don't have physical locations, so we're kind of the second stop. And a lot of times they'll tell us what these other places, these brick and mortars have offered. And my buddy's got this shop in his area, and I swear to God, it doesn't matter what you walk in with. Their maximum offer is $500. Period. Like they had an X-Men 1, a collection with an X-Men 1 and an Avengers 1 Raw walk in. This would have been probably 5 years ago. And I think for this, I don't know how much it was total, but it was most of the Silver Age Marvel keys you could want from late 63 to like 66. I think they gave $1,000 for this collection and had the X-Men one and the Avengers one. Of course, when I call and ask about the X-Men one, because I'm always down to upgrade my keys. Of course, the price was to the moon at that
mhm.
point. But never mind the fact that that's all we paid.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I run into people that sell on Facebook, in the town up near, up north of me. And they're like, oh, that the local shop to me that I don't get along with, the
Mm-hmm.
one I mentioned earlier, that the guy that offered $100, he's about 60 miles away. But the guy local, when I run into someone who's selling comics on Facebook, they'll say that the local. I said, you take it to the comic book guy, and he's like, they don't give him any. They're not giving me anything for this anyway. And then I bought a couple things, and then I was like, no wonder he didn't give you any money for this. I shouldn't have given
Yeah.
you the $50 for what I just bought, but at least it's $50 and
Yeah.
not $500 or $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. We had a
sometimes he
real
knows.
we had a real head scratcher come up here right before Christmas this last year. Um, this guy had been hired to clean out a house that had been sold. The owner had vacated. We still haven't found out exactly what happened to the guy, but basically he'd lived in this house since the mid '60s for sure that we could trace because we actually found one of the ads inside of, I think it was ASM 33 I had. You see where this guy as a kid had filled out one of the like coupons or whatever you could mail in, and it was still actually tied to this address. But this guy had been hired to clean out this house, and they go out to the detached garage and they open the door, and there are allegedly 23 or 22 big metal footlockers all full of comics sitting out in this garage. They all stink to shit. They have been in that garage, I would guess. I swear to you, they haven't sold footlockers like this for 50 years. It's long before I hit this earth. And they've been out there for I don't know how long because they've drawn moisture. So everything smells like mildew. It's very easy to identify these books because what happened is this guy paid his crew that showed up to help him clean this house out in these foot lockers of comics. We've only accounted for about half of them, but it's really easy to figure out where they came from because most of the staples are completely melted into the books and they smell like some sort of omega level mildew. But we have found incredible stuff. Like I held a Werewolf by Night 2 that came out of this collection, which would have been on the later end of the books that came out of this collection. It looked like it just came from the printer. I mean, it was gorgeous. We've Daredevil 1, ASM 14, ASM 9, just super early Marvels all the way through. But like I said, there's a lot of it we haven't found. But the situation kind of wound up being like an old Western where like the local horse gang finds the treasure, right? And it's like, okay, well, here's your cut, here's your cut, here's your cut. And then they spend the rest of the episode of the spaghetti Western trying to screw each other over to
Yeah,
make
yeah,
the most money off of it. So it was by far the most insane situation because like for days on end, me and the local comic shop owner and some other people who were involved, we're all talking, just trying to figure out what the hell was going on because we had all these people coming in with all these ridiculous books, which obviously came from the same spot because they all smelled alike and they all had the same problems. And nobody was giving us a straight story. We had at one point my wife went to Walmart and bought one of those like trifold science fair boards. She's like, I'm going to murder board this. Like, I just can't keep track of what the hell's going on. But at one point we had like 7 different people who were coming in with 7 different stories of where these books came from and all this, trying to sell them. And it was just, you got people talking about they so and so sold you this or whatever, or told you this. Like, I ain't gonna put up with that. I'll go back to prison. I don't care. A guy told me, he's like, I don't know if it's safe for you to come over to look at these right now. I'm just like, what the hell have we gotten ourselves into? It's like, this is comic books. What on earth? One of them wound up having their house broken into. The person who broke into the house loaded up all the comic books into the person's car, stole the car of that person whose comic books they'd just stolen to drive him to the next town over to sell them. So it's just like, it was the most insane stuff in the world, but it's, you know, like, you never know what you're going to run into in
well,
comics.
that's my wife said, I see an antique sign or I see, someone selling comics, I'll go to any house, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the same thing you're saying. Is it safe to go there or not over a comic book?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous
And all I've
sometimes.
been
But
listening to this last week on YouTube is like Craigslist nightmares and Airbnb nightmares and all this. It's like, maybe I should reconsider how I do some of this stuff.
I don't know, yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
so some people, the one woman who had a collection, I went to the house, she was like, let me right in, and you know, and it didn't. I ended up buying a couple books from her, and I've told the story before, and she got kind of pissed after the fact. Like, I got back home and got a message back saying you ripped me off. I bought like 4 or 5 books from her, the only decent books that she had. The
Mm-hmm.
rest were all crap, all those filler books. But
Mm-hmm.
I spent almost an hour with her telling her the stuff, the toys she had were worth the money, not the comic books. And if she needed money, that's what she needed to sell. Here's a guy you can call. And then
Mm-hmm.
she messaged me back all ticked off about what I bought and said, somebody showed up after you and said they would have paid X amount of dollars for that one book you got.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Of course, it's
it,
pretty easy to talk big when you can't see what you're talking about.
right. And that's what I was like, it's not work. It wasn't very in high grade. So it wouldn't have, but that's the thing you run into. And
And it can also be a buying tactic if you tell somebody that the person who bought the stuff that's not there screwed you. Then at that point, you've got justification for your lowball offer that's sure to come
oh,
after
yeah. Yeah.
that. I met a
Good
lady
point.
last summer who had this. I mean, it was 2.5 to 4.5 uh, condition run of Incredible Hulk. And I'm flipping through there. I'm like 148, 162, just like ticking up issue, 177, 178, 179, 183. It's like, shit. And it's always what happens, right? Like if you find
Right.
a run of Incredible Hulk, 180 to 182 are always gone. And I think like is it 154, whatever the first Wendigo is, it was gone. But other than that, it was this nice long run. And I kind of looked at her and I go, somebody else has been through this, haven't she? She's like, yeah, I sold a couple to a guy. I'm like, did he pay you pretty good for what he got? She's like, no, not really. I'm like, I figured that was going to be the case. It's like, People don't know what they have, and like I said, the sharks out there, they're gonna take advantage of the situation, and people don't understand that by removing those three books that were in there, you've cut 80%, 90% of the value out of the whole collection, because when you do the math overall, those bigger books drastically increase the price per book of the collection overall, and when they're gone, then that price per book that you're getting just plummets.
Oh yeah, but see that's the hard part. I'm not ready to buy a whole collection like 17,000 books like you did. Because I don't want all that extra stuff, right? I just want like the big key books. But you run into an issue with, like you just said, somebody that's the first collection I went to look at, same thing. We're all or nothing, right? Because they knew once you pull everything out, then they can't. Then they have a bunch of fluff,
Yeah.
right? But then, unless you go to shows, you can't sell the fluff. It's hard to anyway. You'd have to sell, like you said, lots on eBay. And if you can set up at a show and have a bunch of dollar books, there you go.
Yeah. I've got a buddy who runs pretty high volume store, so I'm sure I'm gonna offload like some sats and dollar books to him at some point. But I've got another friend who got a really good deal. He bought this huge collection. It was like 100 long boxes, but it was mostly modern, just junk, right? So he drove the hours to pick it up, loaded it all up, had to carry it up out of the basement in a house. I don't think there was any air conditioning in the middle of the summer, so it was just like this miserable experience. But he got this 100 long box collection back to his house and started sorting through it. He wound up basically, when he got through all of it, he had 20 long boxes of okay to decent stuff, 80 long boxes of crap. So he lives in the KC metro area, so he just started loading up X number of long boxes and taking them to this buy it again store, this half price books, this just anywhere that would buy comics in bulk and sell them. So basically he'd gotten such a good deal just to get, they wanted it all gone, so he just took everything and he got such a good deal on it. By the time he got done driving around getting $20 a long box out of this absolute crap that he'd sorted out, he'd already paid for the entire collection, and then had
nice.
20 long boxes of stuff left to actually make some decent money on. Now I'm sure at least half of that was probably like $2 to $3 to $5 books, but when it's straight profit, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's the way. That's the way. Like when you look at something, you said you got the Hulk books or whatever those big ones are in the collection. Those ones are going to be where you start your offer at, because the rest of it, that's where you at least want to make that money and then double it. So your buddy was able to at least make his money back on the dollar books or the 50-cent books, and then have the rest to double or triple his money. So it's a gamble. It's if it was easy to do, everybody would do it.
Exactly. And I think that's the thing that most people don't realize, because ultimately anybody that's selling comics, if they want the absolute most for their books, which everybody does, the way to do that is to sell them yourself at retail, whether that's eBay or at a show or what have you. When people start down that road, they get overconfident because, like, man, I'm selling these books. This is easy. And what they don't realize is they're selling the good stuff that people actually want. And once they run out of those books, then they're just stuck. Then you've got all the filler and the chaff, and it's just, when you're going through the same amount of work but getting no return out of it, that's when the reality of the situation sinks in, and you're like, this is going to be a lot of work to get rid of all this stuff.
Oh yeah, that's my concern with the buying a big collection, or if I did, where am I going to store it at? And then I need to go to a show and pay the money for that. And now it's kind of like, you buy a boat. I'm sure you got lakes and rivers near you. Buy a boat. You got a good price on it, but wait, I need a trailer for this thing too. Wait, I got to dock it somewhere. I got to winterize it. Oh, that just add all that money on top of it. So it becomes more and more expensive than what you initially thought. So,
Oh yeah.
you know,
It's
yeah,
like they say, there's no such thing as a free puppy.
nope. That's right. It's no, it's it can be fun though, the treasure hunt, like when you get a big collection and
Hmm.
going through them and finding stuff like that's I go to an auction every Tuesday and I didn't go on this Tuesday, and instead we went up to the mall and whatnot, and I stopped at a
Hmm.
GameStop because they have comics, and I said to my wife,
Yeah.
I have to look through something. I have to
Yeah.
go through some long boxes just for the I need the
Hmm.
fix.
Just to get your fix.
Yeah.
Yep. So
I kind of got into over the lockdown like vintage toys. Like I got the call. My mom's like, "Hey, come get some of your crap out of my basement," which is all my childhood toys and stuff. Which I haven't got them all yet. I'm still working on it, but that was a slippery slope. It kind of that same thing. Like I started going to the Chicago Toy Show, Kane County, and which is the most crazy toy show I've ever seen. But it's just sometimes you got to dig. You just get the bug and you got to go.
what kind of toys did you have, or you were?
Mostly 80s stuff. So I got like my real Ghostbusters, Thundercats, Turtles, of course. Caught the tail end of Motu, Killer Aliens. I had a lot of those. I actually kind of got weirded out of or out by at one point and sold a bunch of them in a garage sale. But I still got all my Ghostbusters and that kind of stuff and Silverhawks,
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. So
No
I felt
GI Joe, no Star Wars.
I had some Joes, not a ton. Those are actually one of the few things that first most of it got sold. Like I had a Mamba and I can't find it. I can find pieces of it, but I've got a lot of my actual figures still. Star Wars I missed. Like I was born in late '83, so
Okay.
it was pretty well on its way out by the time I came around. So I really just kind of caught the very tail end of Masters even. Silverhawks I had a lot of. What was that, like 86?
Yeah, I
I don't
had a lot of
remember.
Silverhawks
I
growing
don't
up
remember
too.
Silverhawks.
Yeah.
Vac Metal. If you like Vac Metal, Silverhawks are the thing for you.
Let's look it up.
They're,
It's like
they're,
a guy with
Transformers.
white hair and silver wings and
yep. It's basically so. Was it, I can't remember the production company that came up with it. But it's Silverhawks is basically a derivative of Thundercats, and then so they had Thundercats was a hit. Then they're like, okay, well let's do this again. So they made Silverhawks. They're like, hey, that one kind of worked too. So let's make Tiger Sharks. So they basically took the same concept, changed the animals, changed the element around it, and made 3 separate cartoons and toy lines out of it.
I don't remember Tiger Shark, but I definitely remember Silverhawk and Thundercats were big.
Yeah. Tiger Sharks was like the last one, the least successful. I remember playing with the toys because I like sharks. And I wish I could find, I don't know if they were mine or babysitters or what, but they are straight up money if you can find them.
Huh.
Like,
I gotta look them up because I never even heard of it. I mean, I remember Mask and Voltron, which
mm-hmm.
were two of my favorite, and GoBots
Yeah.
was the cheap Transformer one.
Yeah. So I had a few G1 Transformers, I guess, like later ones, not the originals.
Yeah,
that
the
most people
Transformer
would
toys
think
go
of.
for crazy money nowadays.
They just had a
Yeah.
bunch at an auction 2 weeks ago. They had just a lunch tray full of them,
Mm-hmm.
$400. They were Shockwave, and they were kind of beat up too. They weren't in good
Mm-hmm.
shape, in my opinion. But they, when
Yeah.
especially when you got somebody going after them, 2 or 3 people, that just raises that
Mm-hmm.
price. So who
Yeah,
knows
for
what's so good
sure.
for it? But
Um,
I
and
end
they
up getting
just
all
had so
my
many
stuff.
pieces.
Which ones? The Transformers?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you do with the pieces? I try to sell individual pieces back in when COVID hit,
Mm-hmm.
and people are like, I don't need that. Like, I'm like
Yeah.
it's his leg. They break. You need a leg.
Mm-hmm.
I want to get rid of this crap. So
Well, like I think of my Optimus Prime. it's a decent display piece, but I don't have any fists. I don't have any of the guns. The trailer's missing a couple parts. It's just they look cool, but they weren't very practical. I mean, in the same sense, like all the Star Wars figures, yeah, they all came with weapons that instantly disappeared into the sandbox, or
the one I want and I lost at my cousin's house was Han Solo in Carbonite. I still want that. If next show I go to, I might buy it.
Like the last 17 Han Solo and Carbonite, or the just the thing that came with the Slave One.
The one that came with Slave One, because I still have Slave One, but I don't have the Carbonite because my cousin buried it, and then we can't find it. And then he moved, and it's somewhere in his old house. So every once in a while, I tell him, "Do you ever find that Han Solo? Because I'm looking for that still."
And it's not socially acceptable to dig up a stranger's yard.
No, not in this day and age, no. But they do bring back nostalgia. I don't know why. I'm okay with selling off the G.I. Joes I had, but I'm not. I want to keep the comics. You know what I mean? Like there's not the toys have somewhat nostalgia, but the comics for me are more so to that. Everyone's different. Collect what you like everybody says. It's the best way to do it.
It was a nice distraction or diversion for me because when you're just getting into comics, it's like anything. You're just getting in. Everything's new. Everything's exciting. You need everything, so it's so easy to find things that you need. But I was at the point, particularly during the lockdown when everything was getting so expensive, like I only needed a dozen or 15 Marvel books at that point in time, and the prices were just going nuts. I wound up paying more for some of the filler issues than I paid for some of the key issues when I was first starting on building this out. I got to the point where I'm like, this is stupid. I need something else to occupy my time for a little bit.
It's all fun to go back, and the auction I go to, this woman must have a barn full of clothes toys she's bringing to the auction, and they are about 10 or 15-year-old toys now, and now they're nostalgic, right? Yep. So that's you get back 80s, 90s, and then even the early 2000s, right? So it's hard to believe.
Yep.
People want to pay for it, but at some point, like the cowboy comics are no longer wanted, right?
Funny the war ones westerns,
and some of these toys, like metal toys and G.I. Joe from the 50s, I don't know if people want. They have value, but the generation of those people die off.
Your customer base is shrinking.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. At some point, our customer base will shrink, and there won't be as many people that want G.I. Joe or what's it called? The Tiger Sharks and Silverhawks.
Yep.
So at some point, it all ends,
Well, there's one thing that might help some of those is like, there's no original ideas anymore. So like, how many generations are we on Ninja Turtles fans at this point, right? So that helps. And, Masters has had a pretty good resurgence lately with the different cartoons and stuff. So there will definitely be things that fall by the wayside. I mean, comics are inevitably going to hit that too. But, we've got multiple generations of superhero comic fans at this point. So
yeah, I think the way they do the movies and the way they're doing the comics, I think we'll keep it, and the toys too. So you gotta, my kids grew up with knowing Iron Man. I grew up with Spider-Man and Wolverine. So those will, keep that going, like you said. So
for sure.
But yeah. But no, we usually try to say that it's an hour long podcast, and then we go for an hour and a half because we just, like to talk, and it's we have a lot of fun. So and we appreciate
I can go down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, we definitely.
Yeah, we didn't even get around to talking about your channel, but we'll have to do that on the next one then.
Well, I mean, I can keep going if you guys can, but I mean, your show.
I know Rohan's got to put his kids to bed, but I got a few more minutes. I mean, we can.
We go a few more minutes. Let's talk about your channel real quick. Like, when did you? So a couple things I was like, when did you start? And then two, like I said in our intro, again, like I feel like I know a lot of knowledge about comics, but there's specifically Marvel and maybe some Batman and like what like I said. Now obviously people know about Evil Ernie and people know, but like you pull out these books out of the ether, like where, like how is the research? Like talk to me about all that.
Okay, well, part of it's just working in a comic shop because I started the channel back like January 29th or something like that. 2020 was my first upload. So, I can say I was on YouTube pre-COVID. all of 6 weeks. Um, but that was fine because I got your first videos are always awful, right? Mine definitely were. Um, and it took me a little while to kind of figure out what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to talk about comics and stuff. But working at the comic shop, the buddy of mine who was the manager and the co-owner had worked there off and on for 30 years. Like, he loved comics, he loved movies, he loved coffee that was just pitch black, and Bush beer and Marlboro cigarettes. That was his life. Like, those five things were the keys to happiness for him. And just being there and getting some brain dump from him, and then the original owner who had started this or opened the store in October of 1973. So, like, the shop I used to work at, it's still open. So it's the second oldest comic shop in Missouri, but it was the longest operating original owner comic shop in the state. So the guy owned it for 49 years before he sold it, which was pretty wild. So he'd seen a lot of stuff, over the years, and they just poured a lot of that information into me over the span of years as we'd have conversations. Everything from, like, Winsor McKay, like Little Nemo and Storyland, stuff that was full broadsheet newspaper cartoons, which, if you don't know Little Nemo, look it up. It's absolutely gorgeous. Through the latest Vertigo story that came out and how that tied back into Constantine or Sandman. It was just getting to walk around and watch somebody who was incredibly passionate about comics and could find you something to read that you were interested in if you gave them 3 movies that you liked, because he knew comics well enough and movies well enough that he could make the connection with that little information. So just being able to watch that interaction with customers over the years was basically the foundation. And then just taking that the next step. So, there were things I like I grew up with the Tick cartoon, things, Nintendo, right? That was hot. So the Valiant books. So I just typically approach it to the point of, okay, what are things that exist out there in the hobby and pop culture that have a comic or were in a comic or relate to a comic that it's not what we talk about. Because one of the things that annoyed the hell out of me about comic book YouTube was you'd get on there and you'd watch these videos, and I don't know if you guys know this, but Amazing Spider-Man 300 is kind of a popular damn book. But we're going to talk about it again this week and next week and the week after that and 6 months from now. And it's just like, I don't want to talk about the same godforsaken books week in, week out for eternity. So I'm like, okay, let's get weird. Let's talk about some stuff that, is enjoyable, because I think that's what we lost a lot of during the boom of the lockdown. Was everybody was so freaking worried about the flip, right? We wanted to make money. We wanted to find the underappreciated gems in the back issues at our local comic shop and take it on eBay and sell it and make 5x 10x our money out of it, which I appreciate the hustle. That's great, but the pendulum was swung too far that direction, right? That's why you got things like comic shops posting signs saying we reserve the right to look this stuff up on eBay before we sell it and adjust our price. That kind of stuff, right? Came out of this. And what I wanted to do is and in the early days, it's like I was just trying to figure out what worked, and I found the top 10 list thing, and I used to call it top 10 comics to invest in, and now I still use that for like my quarterly videos, but for some of the smaller, more frequent videos, it's just like at a price point. It's because what I wanted to do is I wanted to transition to the things that were enjoyable. So it's like, if you have $50 in your pocket, you can pick up a book like this, and maybe this doesn't look like something you'd normally buy, but hey, do you remember Bucky O'Hare? This is Bucky O'Hare's first appearance. Green Rabbit, Space Blasters. I don't know if you guys remember Bucky O'Hare. He had a pretty nice Nintendo game there for a while.
Earthworm Jim.
Earthworm
That's what I
Jim.
wanted.
Yeah, I think Playmates had the toy line of Bucky O'Hare, but it was just one of those crazy 90s properties. And Cadillacs and Dinosaurs from Xenozoic Tales, just all this crazy stuff. I mean, even like Smurfs, did you know Smurfs came out of a comic book? It was a French comic book. But it's
I
just
didn't know that.
yeah, there are all these things that exist in pop culture that came into comics at some point, or came from comics before they got out into pop culture. And it's just like, I'm at that age, like I turned 40 this year, and it's just, I've always kind of been a nostalgia driven person. So it's like, if I'm out there thinking about this kind of stuff, somebody else is probably out there thinking about this kind of stuff. And that's kind of where I've chosen to land at the current moment, is to talk about stuff that's a little off the beaten path.
Yeah, I
Now, some-
appreciate it. And I was just saying, one of the other videos of yours that I was really into was when you would pick a character,
Yes.
and like you say Doctor Doom, and you're like, okay, if you want a book at the $25 range, this is
Oh
the
yeah,
book.
yeah. I saw that
If you
one.
want a book for the $100 range,
Yep.
this is the book. If you want a book for $1,000, and then if you have an unlimited budget, this is
Yeah,
the book. Like,
go
I
for this
love
one.
those videos.
FF5.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that series this morning. I think as I was getting ready for work, it's like I need to do another one of those.
Yeah.
Which I've to anybody who's is subscribed to the channel and familiar with it, like I've sucked the last couple months with all these shows and just trying to get like, there's comic book world in real life, which is like book prep, con prep, selling at shows. Then there's like YouTube comic book life, and the two are butting heads severely right now.
Yeah.
It's got to be a grind.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
when
don't know
can't.
what R&R is.
Well, see, like I said, I needed my comic fix. That's why I went to that shop to go look through books. So I get enjoyment from that, or watching a show like yours,
Well,
or
thank you.
Swaggle, and I get my fix on comics doing that. So I appreciate the content, but it's a grind, right? Because
Yeah.
there's no downtime. But I do enjoy the hobby part of it. That's why I don't mind doing it. But sometimes when I'm going from one antique store to another, and I'm like, I could be home with my kids or wife doing something, it's like, is this all worth it? But again, it's just, there's time spent and on things that aren't worth it, and time that you wish you could have back. So it's that's the way life is. So
For sure.
But what I wanted to ask you a question on something that I forgot the name of it, and I wouldn't be able to find the video quickly. But you mentioned on a recent video about a comic that was tied to either Aliens or Terminator that came out years before, and it was pretty graphic.
Yeah, I almost grabbed that as one of the examples of books I was currently buying. Death Rattle is probably what
That's
you're
it.
talking about.
Death Rattle.
Because there's this awesome documentary on Alien called Memory. I bought it on Vudu. So I can watch it and rewatch it, but it goes into like the inspiration behind Alien. Follows like Steve Bannon a lot, like his wife's in there. Giger talks about the design elements, but one of the things they attribute to Bannon is, he says, or O'Bannon, is because he co-wrote or he did Dark Star with John Carpenter before he did Alien. So he did quite a bit of stuff. He said, I didn't steal from anybody, I stole from everybody. So one of the things I've been trying to do is, they specifically reference a few different comic books in this documentary that he lifted certain plot elements from that wound up in Alien. So Death Rattle is basically this astronaut finds this old relic on a desolate space rock somewhere, and it turns out to be a trap, and whatever it is, like, goes into him and takes over his person and turns him into some sort of a avatar for itself at that point. But yeah, it's pretty graphic. And then there's another example is Weird Science 8, the EC issue. From way back in the 50s, there's a story called Seeds of Jupiter, where these guys are on a naval vessel, aircraft carrier, whatever it is, and this meteorite from space crashes onto the deck of the boat, and they go running out there to look at it, and it's whatever it is like cracked open. There are all these things that look like peach pits that have spilled out of this thing. So of course, it's the 50s, so there's this old boy on the boat who likes to chew on peach pits that they call peach pit. So they're like, hey, I'll give you $1 or whatever, chew on one of those, or they bet him to put one of those in his mouth, and the guy being gullible does, and somebody, when he does it, is one of the other guys pats him on the back and he swallows it. Next thing you know, I don't feel so well, and they go rush him into emergency surgery, and they cut him open, and this monster crawls out of him and bloop over the side of the deck into the ocean. Like, well, we won't see that guy. Won't see that again. And then it crawls out of the ocean and destroys the city or something. But yeah, it's just, that's the kind of crazy stuff I like to chase. I grew up with Alien and Aliens, so those were pretty high on my list of things to track down for this year. But I've got issues 1 and 2 of Death Rattle. There's a third issue that I don't have, but it's fairly obscure 70s underground horror, so it's not something I run into very often.
Yeah, I looked for that after that episode, because I thought that was pretty neat, because I was a big Aliens fan myself, so I had to get this book. But I didn't know about Death Rattle, so I always like to hear where these guys got the inspiration from, because again, like you said earlier, these are not new ideas; they're just repackaged,
repurposed.
Yeah. That's one of the things I've enjoyed. Like Jim Stone started, and then Dark Horse continued these oversized hardcover reprints of EC. They call them the EC Archives. They've actually just started putting them out in trade paperbacks too. I think there's a volume or 2 out of several of those. But it's just a really high grade reprint of those EC stories, and next time you're at a shop that has some, pick them up and look who wrote the forewords for these archives. Just the people that those comic books inspired built pop culture as we know it. It's George Lucas. My God, who else? I'm drawing a blank, but George Lucas for sure was one of them. I want to say Stephen King for sure did one, but it's just,
Clive Barker and
just I wouldn't be surprised if Carpenter did one, John Carpenter. But I should probably actually go freshen up on some of those names. But it's such, those things wouldn't have existed at any other time, and they were completely out of their time when they did exist. So
that's something I never see. Well, I see the DC horror comics when I go to the antique store. I never see like the pre-code horror ones or anything even close to that.
Yeah.
It's just they're not around. I don't know if someone doesn't sell them, they keep them. There's something about horror movies and horror books and that people don't want to give up.
Are you guys familiar with Chamber of Chills 19? The Misfits
like
cover,
the
glass, yeah.
Yep.
I was at a dinner. There's this show in Oklahoma that it's. Are you familiar with like the biggest little show or greatest little show or whatever? It's somewhere in New England up there. It's a 1-day show. It's like the best little show or something like that. But it's a little 1-day comic show, but it is massive. Like it is, people come from all over the country to go to it. We have something kind of like that in the general neighborhood down in Oklahoma. It's called OFCON. And it's just this club of fandoms that have been around since the mid-60s. And they put on a comic show. And they stopped it for a little while, but they started it back, 10 years ago, something like that. But for 2 days in the middle of Oklahoma, unbelievable stuff happens. Like the stuff that these club members have that they bring just for show and tell is insane. You get some of the biggest comic book dealers in the South and the Midwest and California that come out and set up at this. If you're on the CGC boards, you meet people on the CGC boards that have just ridiculous stuff. It's unbelievable what is in there. But specifically what I was referencing, I put on a dinner on Saturday night, just, me and my buddies who go to this show and people that are there. We go out, we eat steak, we drink and have a good time. One of the guys who came to this dinner we were talking about that book, and he goes, check this out. And he starts scrolling on his phone. He goes, this isn't mine, but it's a friend of mine's. He turns his phone around. This guy has 19 copies of that book.
Huh.
Holy shit.
It just all flayed out. It's just like, no wonder I can't find one.
Yeah. Well, we talked about that last week with Swagglehouse. Like, there are guys that there are people that have like, I mean, for instance, like we've seen that video that Golden Age Guru put up of 50 Hulk 181s.
Yeah.
Right. Or we chatted with a guy named Errol who worked up with AF-15s to get to a Superman one. I think he had at one time.
wow.
I think he's had over 15 AF-15s in his life, and at one time he's got a picture on his Instagram. There's like 8 of them laid out
awesome.
on his bed. And like there's a woman on Instagram that I follow. She has 3 Batman ones,
Wow.
and so on and so forth. So it's like, yeah, and like Errol's also told me like the guy that owns Action Comics #1, the highest. There's 2 9.0s. He told me, I don't know, but he said the same guy owns both of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, there's crazy stuff like that. And like, yeah.
Well, if the Edgar Church copy ever comes up and gets graded and goes up for sale, he's going to be very sad. Because it's going to blow his 2 9.0s out of the water.
Yeah.
As
Or,
I
I mean,
understand it.
The week
What's that one
before.
gonna be? What's that grade? They're thinking that grade's going to be.
I don't know. The way I've
Superman
heard it
one was
described is that it is significantly better than the 9.0s that are known. So whether that's 9.4, 9.6, God forbid a 9.8.
Oh yeah, I mean look at the 10x as you go from a 9.0 to a 9.6, 9.8. Yeah.
I mean, it's not even graded, and it's, everybody knows it's the highest graded or will be the highest graded if and when it ever pops up.
Yeah. And like the week before Swagloss, we interviewed Darren from Fantastic, the Selling Superman film. And he's got that story where they had 16 giant size X-Men ones and 11 of them or something are 9.8s. Like, it's just, there's crazy stuff out there for sure.
And he's smart enough that he said he's not going to dump them to flood the market.
Yeah, you need to trickle that kind of stuff out or you'll shoot yourself in the foot.
Yep.
And that's the thing. It's morbid to talk about, but there's going to be so much silver and bronze stuff hit the market in the next 5 to 10 years as these original owners start passing away at a higher frequency. I think it's going to just blow a lot of us away, the stuff that we will see. And I mean, that we're already seeing. I mean, that collection there's a great example.
Yeah. Yeah. Will be definitely be interesting.
I'd love to get the crack at some of that stuff first, but I don't see the horror stuff too much, and I think that stuff's kind of intriguing because to me it's rare just because I never see it.
Well, I mean, what other comic books were ever actively sought for destruction?
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
So
it's
a very expensive hobby to get into. Another thing I'm working on is my Tales from the Crypt run this year. So I need just a couple more of those, and I'll have that done. And
yeah, see those ones are neat because I love the show back on HBO, right?
Yep.
But I didn't realize they made those in the 50s, something like that. And they did reprints, which is hard for me to know which one's the original and which ones are the 80s or 70s, whatever what that run was.
The main thing is a lot of times they'll put a different, like, additional text on it. Like, so this is the last Tales I picked up for myself. It's 33. But you can just see, it's big title, no like original horror comics from the 50s or anything like that on it. So it's just, and 10 cent up here. That's a pretty good giveaway.
Help me out is knowing if it's like 25 cents or $1. I'm like, it wasn't a 1950s book, but they look so similar.
They did, most of them are exact cover swipes. I mean, honestly, probably the easiest way to tell is if it looks like it's in decent shape, it's probably not an original one because ECs exist in primarily 2 conditions: crap, and then the Gaines file copies, and anything in between the two is kind of a unicorn.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like any grade is better than no grade, in my opinion. Low grade is better than no grade.
For sure.
But usually when I find something like that good, it's like, it's messed up. It's like, damn it. Why didn't I find a 9.8? But
and honestly, on the PCH, I kind of like some wear on them. Ideally, I'd like them to not be growing things or to stink or anything like that, and to mostly be in one piece. But I feel like the stress lines, the tears, maybe even a little staining or dirt or whatever, it fits
Kind of
the
goes with
aesthetic,
it.
right?
Yeah.
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 True. I see Ryan do that. He talks about the books he's buying, the Golden Age, and they're
Mm-hmm.
in bad shape and they can have some restoration. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think that those 50s horror can have the restoration, but they're okay to look rough, like you said, because it fits
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
genre.
Oh yeah.
I
Yeah.
never see him though. I wish I did at least a crack at something decent.
Mm-hmm.
Just, but it's kind of like I don't know if Adam Hughes, Art Adams, those
Mm-hmm.
guys make some pretty graphic adult type looking
Mm-hmm.
covers, right?
Yep.
And you can normally tell which ones will command the most money because of what they show.
Mm-hmm.
Same with horror books, right?
Yeah.
When you find one in the wild, it's probably not a great cover art
Mm-hmm.
because the best one somebody kept, right?
Yeah, definitely. And the sad thing is, I mean, there's um, Ryan Swag and I talk offline all the time. Like we have a constantly running Instagram chat. In fact, I'm 8 messages behind on it just in the time we've been here. That's how lively this conversation is. But we were talking about it one night, and it's like there are just certain elements that it's basically like a checklist. If your cover has one of these or multiples of these, it's just more likely that it's going to be of significant value. It's like skulls, hot looking, attractive women,
Mm.
you know, monster, just you name it. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Knife, hatchet.
Yeah, exactly. Some sort of weapon, ghouls, you name it. It's just like as you start checking those things off, the likelihood that the issue could be more valuable goes up. But there's so many, and I constantly learn about new pre-code horror titles all the time because it was such a bandwagon. Everybody jumped on it, absolutely everybody. So that's why some of it can seem so scarce or rare too, is because it's not like it was Marvel putting it out or DC was putting it out, so it was getting hundreds of thousands of copies around every month. It was this small publisher that maybe ran, I don't know what their runs were, but probably not millions of copies like DC
Oh yeah.
or Marvel would have. And some of them could potentially even have been isolated in certain regions or whatever. But yeah, it's a very fun but very challenging and expensive thing to dive into. But like I grew up, my mom loves bad sci-fi and scary movies and stuff like that. Watching Monster Vision on
Oh
TNT
yeah.
or TBS every Saturday night. Like I grew up loving that kind of scary movie, monster movie
The camping.
vibes.
Well, yeah, the camping
Yeah,
ones.
yeah, exactly. Like Universal Monsters are one of my favorite things in the world. So I was just predisposed to be into pre-code horror, and it's a costly interest, but it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
My buddies used to watch them all the time. Those like redneck zombies, or
Mm-hmm.
some of the '80s ones. I forget the one that we Evil Dead and Army of Darkness, and there was
Yep.
another one. I can't think of the name of it now, but it was we love that stuff. But
Oh yeah.
I never thought to buy the comics. Right? They always seemed to be
Mm-hmm.
not valuable back then, but now they are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and even if you think about some of the slashers, like there wasn't a Michael Myers comic except for like the last 20 some odd years. Jason, I think, popped up in a Tops comic in the 90s. Freddy Krueger had a random cover appearance at some point. But yeah, a lot of these guys, just when they did finally make it into comics, it was small publishers, small press, just kind of
Years
random
later.
random stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna keep looking for those because I at least want one good
Yeah.
cover to display.
And that's kind of the thing. Like finding a good one is tough. The Halloween ones, there's some decent ones of theirs, but it's like anything else. They got to where they were making so many variants, it was nuts to try and keep track of it.
Yeah, and even the '50s ones you're talking about too, the Tales of the Crypt. You know, you might find it. You want the perfect one if you're going to spend some money, right? If you're going to spend a couple
Mm-hmm.
$100, I want to spend one for the one with the woman's head cut off or whatnot, but that's thousands, right? So I
Yeah.
can't justify a couple $100 for a not. It's missing the hatchet and the pretty lady and the ghoul, but it has this and that, and you know,
Yeah. Yeah. If you're going to drop that kind of money, you want the punchline to be there
yep.
for sure.
We should
Yeah.
kind of wind it down here though, guys. We're like at 2 hours, so
All right.
All right.
yeah.
Well, hey, it's like we said, this hobby's fun, expensive, and enjoyable to talk about. I tell you.
It is
Mhm.
indeed.
But yeah,
Appreciate
no,
you coming on, Drew. This was awesome.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me, guys. And I mean, like you noticed, this is why I started the channel, because I can just go and go and go and
Yeah.
go.
no, we definitely like to have you on again. We got our own channel now, so we're gonna do some more smaller videos, and then some more definite. Bring some people back to talk again on this channel,
Yeah.
and get into something specific, and
Mhm.
and if you have some of your shows, if you want to go over some of the stuff that happens at these shows, we'd love to have you back on just to talk
Yeah.
about the show, what you sold, and then what's going on with the channel once you get
Yeah.
back
sure.
up and running on that. So
For sure. Well, welcome to YouTube, and congrats on starting your channel, and I hope it goes well for you. It's
Thanks a lot.
it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun along the way too.
Yeah.
yeah, we both look forward to the interviews and the my Instagram feeds usually Rohan sending me check this book out, check that book out, and back and forth. So
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
yeah, but no, we appreciate it. Glad to talk to you. Glad to get to know you. Look to
Yeah.
talk more on Instagram, and next time we have you back on. So we appreciate it.
Sounds great. Well, thanks for the invite, and I hope I didn't bore you too long with my long-windedness.
No,
I
not at
enjoy
all.
every minute of it.
Not at
So I
all.
look forward to doing it again. I thank everybody for watching. Make sure you all like, subscribe, and comment. We like to get the comments to respond to, and looking forward to having Drew back on. Maybe we'll have you and Swaggle and Ryan on at one point and do that'd be a good time.
It might be hard to get a word in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all right. But no, thanks again, Drew. Good luck with everything in the shows, and we'll talk with you soon.
All right,
All
thanks,
right.
guys. Have a good night.
All right. Peace
Later,
out.
guys.
See you, everybody.
See ya.